All right, I think we're going to get started. Thank you guys all for inviting me here today. So my name's Joe. I'm with NAMI Metro Suburban. If you're not familiar with NAMI, we do a lot of different things. One of them is education. So we do a lot of education for community members, sometimes for private businesses. We do a whole lot of education for our teenagers. So we go to junior high and high schools. And primarily what we're talking about is mental health, stress, and all those related things. Another big bucket is we do a lot of service work as well. So we have a lot of direct service. You might be familiar with our drop-in center. You might see it on 290 when you drive by. We also have a living room in Summit and a living room in LaGrange. Summit is bilingual. There's always Spanish speakers there. So if you are not familiar with the living rooms, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But today we're here to talk about burnout and self-care. So I just asked a minute ago how many people feel stress, and I think either you raised your hand or you nodded your head. There was a couple of people who didn't move, so they're the ones we need to talk to because they might have figured this out more than me. So, but I always like to start off is this is not a presentation that is going to take stress out of your life. This is something that this is going to give you some tools to be able to utilize to help manage stress. And I know sometimes when people hear self-care, they're like, oh my gosh, I watch this stuff on TikTok all the time. I don't have time for a vacation. I can't afford a massage every day. And, I love bubble baths and putting green mud on my face and cucumbers on my eyes, but I have kids. I can't do that every day. And that's okay. And if any of those things help you and you can do that, great. I encourage them. But what we want to talk today about is meaningful self-care that you could build into your life daily. And these are things that aren't necessarily a huge commitment. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. The expectation isn't that you're going to master all of those, but maybe you take a couple of these tips away and maybe you could help manage some of that stress as well. So to start off, we are going to talk a little bit about burnout. So burnout is described as the physical or mental collapse caused by overwork or stress. And stress and burnout really affects our mental health. And just so we're on the same page, we all have mental health. Some days our mental health is better than other days. It's just like we all have physical health. And we have to maintain our mental health just like we have to maintain our physical health, right? So if I go to the gym and I work out really hard all day and I eat super healthy all day, does that mean I'm healthy for the rest of my life? Absolutely not. And the same goes for our mental health. So we're going to talk about some things that we could practice daily, or at least almost daily, that isn't a huge time commitment to help us kind of manage some of that stress in our life. So first, covering burnout. So these are some questions that you want to consider. And if you're saying yes to any of these questions, there is a chance you might be experiencing burnout. And burnout's a spectrum, right? It's not like you're good and then tomorrow it's stressful and all of a sudden you're feeling burnt out. There are a lot of these things that you're going to notice a little bit, and those things start to build and multiply and add on. So it's really important if you are noticing some of these things and you're like, it's not really a big deal. You might want to start practicing some of these techniques we're talking about today because it might be helpful in the long run to help kind of minimize some of that burnout in the future. So if you're noticing that you're becoming more cynical or critical at work, so if you're kind of dragging yourself to work, and more than just a normal like, oh, it's Monday, I'm tired, I don't want to go to work. People who love their job and are not burned out get that feeling too. So, but if you're really like, oh man, I'd do anything not to go to work today. If you're having that feeling pretty often, that's a big warning sign. If you're becoming irritable, impatient with coworkers, with people you're working with. If you're really low energy or your productivity isn't the same as it used to be. Difficulty concentrating, so that could also be a warning sign of a mental health condition too. So when we're stressed, when we're overwhelmed, when we're experiencing those symptoms of mental health conditions, sometimes it's really hard to focus. So sometimes when we're looking out for other people, if we notice all of a sudden maybe the quality of their work drops and there's not really a reason. They didn't just get like a new project that they don't know how to manage, or they didn't necessarily get some really bad news like family news or something. And if you're noticing their decline in their quality work, that might be a good time to check in with your coworker and just to make sure that you could help them with anything. So using negative coping skills. So maybe using food, or drugs or alcohol to feel better. So you want to make sure, are you paying attention to, like, are you reaching for that drink maybe a little earlier in the day? Are you reaching for that extra drink? Maybe you just had one, but now it's turning into 2, 3, 4, 5. It's really important to kind of try to pay attention to those things and make sure you're managing it. One of the first things that we usually notice is a change in sleep habits, though. So that could look a couple different ways. So some people they sleep too much. So that could be for a couple reasons. So sometimes people are trying to avoid those difficult emotions they're having. Or a side effect of a mental health condition or being overwhelmed with stress is that even though you get enough hours of sleep, you still wake up not feeling rested. So you might get 10, 12, 13, 14 hours of sleep, but it feels like you only got 3 hours of sleep. And again, those are side effects of being overwhelmed, stressed, and mental health conditions as well. Other people have trouble sleeping. So sometimes you have those days where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired, I can't wait so I could just lay in bed, and it's 9:30, the lights are out, and you're like, okay, I gotta do all these things tomorrow. That dumb thing I said to my boss, and all these different things come out, and then you have a hard time falling asleep. If you're anything like me, though, I fall asleep super easy. That's usually not a problem. But then I wake up in the middle of the night or super early in the morning, and all those things start racing through. My file cabinet starts going, and I can't fall back asleep. So again, that's one of my own personal stress response. So also, there's a lot of physical symptoms. And first, I always like to remind people is you want to rule out any physical causes as well. So if you're experiencing some of these things, it's important to check out a doctor and not just assume that it's stress or mental health. But I think it's more the opposite, where people always assume it must be a physical cause more often, but a lot of times it could be stress or mental health. So headaches, stomach aches, digestion issues, other physical body aches, feeling overtired. Those are all different warning signs to pay attention to. Causes, so if you're having like a real big lack of control in your job, so if you don't really have much control, job expectations, so if those aren't really clear to you, any dysfunctional workplace dynamics, extremes of activity, so that means maybe you have like these really, really, really busy days, and then the next week you don't really have that much to do. But then you have these really busy days, and then no. So that big fluctuation of being busy and really slow, that could also cause some burnout. Lack of social support, and then that work-life imbalance. So you want to make sure that you're also taking care of yourself by doing those things that you enjoy, that you love to do. And you guys probably already know what you love to do and what fills your cup and charges your battery. But aren't those the things that we push to the side first, right? That we say, I got this big project, I'm going to sleep a little less, or I'm going to skip a meal because I have to make it to this meeting or whatever. And those things add up. Risk factors, similar, heavy workload, long hours, work-life balance, also working in the helping profession. And I actually consider working at the Village as a helping profession. You have a lot of people coming in every day, no matter what department you're in, looking for support, asking questions. There's probably people who come in elevated even sometimes, I'm sure, for certain reasons. And so when you're working with folks in the helping profession, that actually kind of ticks that risk up a little bit higher as well. And again, feeling like you don't really have that much control over work. So how do we address it? So we're going to go over a handful of self-care topics. And like I said, these are things that you're going to hopefully be able to build into your daily life, daily schedule, and not take too much away from the rest of your schedule, so to speak. So we're going to talk about practicing meaningful self-care, holding space, getting distance from those thought patterns. So if anybody has like those negative thoughts, intrusive thoughts, we're going to talk a little bit about that. Redefining success, so talking about failure, resilience, mindfulness, gratitude. So we're going to go over a lot of different topics today. I also want to encourage that if anybody has any questions or comments, raise your hand, speak out. I love to be interrupted. I'm totally okay with that. I think that helps enrich the presentation. So feel free to share any experiences of things that maybe worked for you or maybe things that didn't work for you, and jump right in. So, practicing meaningful self-care. So this sometimes means going back, first focusing on your most basic needs. And sometimes I feel silly talking to a room full of adults and saying, make sure that you're eating 3 meals a day and you're eating nutritious foods and bringing a snack for that time when you're hungry at 3 p.m., before you get to leave. So eating nutritious foods, drinking enough water throughout the day, exercising 30 to 60 minutes a day, depending on how intense it is, and then also making sure that you're getting about 8 hours of sleep every night. Those things are important for everybody, but it's really essential for folks who are really experiencing a lot of stress, or if you're living with a mental health condition. Those are the first places that are a great place to start. That might mean that you have to develop some routines, right? So I sometimes have a hard time going to bed. It's not because I can't fall asleep. It's that I don't have like a great routine at night. I always feel like I got to do this, I got to do that, and all of a sudden it's 11:30, and I'm like, I should have went to bed 2 hours ago. So maybe that looks like shutting off your devices, your TV, your iPad, whatever you use, maybe an hour before bed. Maybe that's adjusting lighting or putting on music or sounds that are comforting. So maybe that routine is packing your lunch or snacks the night before, so you make sure you don't get hungry every day. Or that routine where you're like, okay, I'm going to make sure I make it to the gym these certain days. So just making sure that you are taking care of, again, to some of those most basic needs. Now, holding space. So I'm a social worker. I'm an LCSW. So we talk a lot about holding space for other people and helping support them, being good listeners. And holding space is really creating the environment to practice empathy and validate in the full humanity of the person who is sharing with you. So what the heck does that mean, right? So I have a video, actually, that's going to talk a little bit about holding space and empathy. So some people have seen this video. I already see a couple smiles. Like, this is Brene Brown, if you're not familiar with her. She is a wonderful author and speaker. She has a really ton of great videos and webinars, so I do suggest to check out some Brene Brown material. But I love this video. If you see more and more presentations from me, you're going to also notice that I love cartoon videos. So we'll start off with this one. It's just a couple minutes.
Softheon Marketplace Cloud Control. It's the only all-in-one automated solution for commercial.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
I think that video does a really great, gives some great examples, because I think it does a really great job giving some examples of also what not to do, because how many times have we been that deer peeking through the hole, like, oh, I can't sit with your uncomfortable feelings, so do you want a sandwich? Like, is that going to help? Like, no, sometimes it's really like trying to experience that feeling with that person, which could be hard, right? And if you're a person, empathy is something we're not really born with. We could learn to be more empathetic. And if you have trouble sometimes kind of getting in touch with that empathetic side, I always remind people is even if you haven't experienced what that person experienced, you have experienced that emotion before. So go back to a point in your life where you experience that emotion that that person is expressing to you, and sometimes that helps you kind of get more in touch with your own empathetic side. So yeah, any questions so far? Okay. So that was more talking about holding space for other people's. But what we wanted to make sure we're also doing is holding space for ourselves. And that's something that we don't talk about as much, right? And how does that look? So one thing is setting boundaries. So setting boundaries might look like maybe not taking on that extra work assignment, not coming in on your day off. Maybe you have plans on Friday night, but it was a long week, and it's okay to cancel plans if you want to just stay and veg out and rest. It might be setting boundaries with people's behaviors. So if they're not being kind to you, if they're not treating you well, it's very okay to set those boundaries. And many years ago, an old boss of mine sent me a meme before meme was even a word, actually. This was an email, and it was a picture of somebody treading water and swimming. And it basically said that setting boundaries can be really difficult at the beginning, but once you set boundaries, you could tread water forever. So it is hard sometimes to set those initial boundaries, but I do guarantee once you set those boundaries, it gets a lot easier. Also, asking for help. Does anybody here sometimes have trouble asking for help? Yeah, absolutely. We need to, though. It takes a village, right? The village of Oak Park. But it's really important. And the biggest tip I have for this is starting off by asking for help for those small things. Because when you ask for help for the small things, when those big things come up, you already got your team behind you. It's going to be a little bit easier to ask for help for those big things. Being intentional. These things just don't happen on their own. You have to make time for them. You have to be intentional and make sure that you are setting the boundaries. You're asking for help. You're doing all those things I talked about earlier, making sure that you're drinking water, eating healthy, all those things. And because if you're not intentional, things really run away pretty quickly, and it's easy to forget about that you set these boundaries, that you need extra help, that you need to drink some more water in the day. So again, holding space for ourselves is one of the first steps in helping take care of ourselves. All right, next we're going to talk about negative thought patterns and how those can be really intrusive and hard to shake sometimes, right? And we don't really have that much control over those negative thoughts. They kind of just pop in our head. So I have another great cartoon video that talks a little bit about those negative thoughts. So we'll check that one out too.
So imagine that you're sitting in front of a sushi train at one of those Japanese restaurants, and there are all these dishes going past on the train. And in the center, there is the chef creating all of these dishes. The chef is like your mind, and the dishes are like all of those thoughts, ideas, memories that keep cropping up, coming and going all day long. Some of the dishes on that sushi train may be very appealing. Some of the stuff on that sushi train may be unappealing. And some of it may be neutral, and take it or leave it. And it's much the same with our thoughts, memories, ideas that pop up throughout the day. Some of them are very pleasant, we really like them, we want to hold on to them. Some of them are very unpleasant and we just want to turn away from them, get rid of them. And a lot of them are kind of neutral, they're neither positive nor negative. So all day long, the sushi chef of our mind is creating all these different dishes, and the train keeps carrying them round and round. These thoughts keep cropping up throughout the day. Now we can learn to step back and watch our thoughts coming and going in much the same way that we can step back and watch that sushi train. An unpleasant dish pops up on the train, we don't have to turn away in disgust and horror. A pleasant dish comes by, we don't have to reach over and grab it and stuff it down our mouth. And we can do the same with our own thoughts. We can step back with an attitude of openness and curiosity and watch them come and stay and go in their own good time.
Yeah, I like that video a lot. I think it just gives a good visual and just reminds us that we don't have to always put a ton of energy in every single thought that we have. And also, some of those thoughts that we have may or may not be true, right? Sometimes we have this thought, these feelings that we have, and we're like, oh, this must be true, this has to be true, but sometimes it's our brain kind of playing tricks on us. And what those are called are cognitive distortions. Sometimes they're called thinking traps, and there are tons of them out there. These four up here, these are four of some of the more common thinking traps that people experience, and I can almost guarantee that everybody has experienced these four probably in the past week or so. So let's go through them, just kind of break them down, talk about a little bit what they are. So first one is all or nothing thinking. And it's kind of what it sounds like. It's all or nothing. It's just the extremes. So there's not any room for middle ground. So it's kind of like if you're not first, you're last, that attitude. So this sometimes works against us. So let's say we have a couple big work projects coming up, and you're like, okay, these are all due at the end of next week. I don't think I'm going to be able to finish it all. You know what? I'm just not going to do any of it. And sometimes we get that feeling because sometimes it's even a mental block, but if you're at a job and you don't do any of your work, is that going to be a good outcome for you? No, not at all. It's going to really work against you. So then all or nothing thinking like in those extremes is not going to be helpful. Overgeneralization, kind of similar, just those extremes, but what the difference is this takes one instance and then generalizes that instance to all other instances moving forward. So, example I like to give is, so I present a lot, right? Kind of like close to almost every day. And some days I do awesome. I knock it out of the park. I say everything I mean to say. I say things in order. I say things clearly. I don't forget anything. People understand. They nod their heads. Maybe I make a joke and people even laugh. And it's great. Other days, I blow it. I mix things up. I forget parts. I say things really confusing. And it just doesn't work out. Now, because I messed up on that presentation, does that mean I'm always a bad presenter? No. It means I had a bad day, right? A bad class, bad presentation. So, but it's really easy for us to kind of go back into that overgeneralization because we have what's called a negativity bias. And what a negativity bias means is our brains automatically go to the most negative thing. So, and 80% of our thoughts are naturally negative. And that's because our brains are wired for protection. So when you go back many years ago, back when we used to have to hunt for food and worry about large predators and things like this, this was really helpful. It's our fight, flight, or freeze response, and that kept us safe and kept us alive. But today, we're not really fighting off predators on the streets of Oak Park right now, right? So, but we do have a lot of new stressors that maybe when our ancestors were cave people, they didn't experience, right? But our body and our brains respond the same way. So let me give a couple examples. So let's say you are hiking through the woods, and then a bear jumps in your path. Your body's going to go in that fight, flight, or freeze response, right? You're going to either try to fight the bear, run, play dead, whatever it is, you're going to do whatever it takes to help you survive. And your body automatically responds to that. You don't even really have any control over that. Let's say another week you have a presentation coming up that you're worried about. your body can respond the same exact way. And the bear's scary, right? It could attack you, it could eat you, it could do a lot of harmful things. And that presentation, it might be important, but are you going to get eaten if you don't do well at the presentation? No. But because your body and your brain are responding in the same way, that causes a lot of stress in our life. And those things that aren't life-threatening, when our body and brains are responding like it is a life-threatening event, that can be really difficult. Should statements, probably the most common. I should be going to bed earlier. I should be getting up earlier. I should be exercising more. I should be eating healthier. I should. Or I should have said that thing to that person yesterday. Sometimes it lives in the past. And should statements aren't really helpful. Most of the time, we're just kind of picking on ourselves. When you're making a should statement, you're not coming up with like a new plan or how to be more productive and do things differently. So when next time you catch yourself making a should statement, maybe turn that should statement into a SMART goal. You guys familiar with SMART goals? So a SMART goal is a great way to kind of turn that should statement into something more productive. So you write your goal. I want to, run a marathon in 3 months. And so you have a time limit, you have your goal, and what are those steps that you're going to be there? And if you just say, I should exercise more, I should be a runner, it's not going to get you there. But doing that SMART goal is going to help you get you there. Fourth one, emotional rationalization. So the example I like to give here is, let's say you're just a couple of minutes late for a meeting and you walk into a quiet room, and when you open the door squeaks. And because the door squeaks, everybody darts their eyes in your direction. And because everybody darts their eyes in your direction, you start to feel embarrassed. And maybe your face turns a little red, maybe you're like a little shaky, you're sweaty, maybe your thoughts are racing a little bit, and you're thinking, everybody's looking at me, I feel embarrassed. So after that, your brain starts making these thoughts where like, oh, why do I feel embarrassed? Is there mustard on my shirt from lunch? Do my shoes match? Does my hair look all whack? And your brain's creating all these different reasons why you feel embarrassed, even though those reasons might not be true at all. Because it's just like walking into a room embarrassing on its own. No, right. But maybe because the door squeaked, and maybe because everybody looked at you, you felt embarrassed, and then you started thinking about all these different reasons why you should be embarrassed. But you don't have mustard in your shirt, your shoes and socks match, your hair looks beautiful, but you're still going to that negativity bias again, all those negative things that we talked about. So that being said, it's easy for me to stand up here and talk about what these cognitive distortions are. It is a lot harder for me in my personal life to start to get distance from those negative thoughts. So I got a couple tips to help you on your way, though. The first step might sound simple, but it's not. Notice the thought. And it can be really hard. Sometimes other people around us might notice that these are cognitive distortions, but to ourselves, it's hard to recognize. So my tips would be, look out for those should statements. That's one. Also, look out for those words like always or never, those extremes. Oh, I always mess up on this. Oh, I never get invited to these things. And when you start to notice those phrases, also noticing patterns. So if let's say you go on social media and you see and often when you go on, you see friends out at the movies or a basketball game or socializing, whatever, out to dinner or something, and you think, oh my gosh, I never get invited to anything, and that's kind of like a pattern you're noticing, it might be time to pay a little attention to that and see if that's something that might be one of these cognitive distortions. And then next step is to reframe or rewrite that thought in a more neutral way, or positive. Neutral is fine, though, too. And when we're able to restate and rephrase that in a more positive or neutral way, that helps us get distance. So let's say we text someone, and that person does not text us back. Sometimes our immediate thought is, did I say something to make them mad? Do they not like me anymore? Am I not cool enough for them? All these negative things pop up in your head. But how can we reframe that? I want to ask the group. What is a way, if somebody doesn't text you back, what is a neutral reason why they didn't text you back. They're busy, right. Their phone's off. Their phone broke. When I usually do that, when I bring up this example to the kids, I'm like, maybe their mom or they said something wrong to their mom or dad and got their phone taken away. They get grounded or something like that. There are so many reasons, but again, going back to that negativity bias, our brain takes us to that negative place a lot of times. Fourth tip, treating your negative thoughts like a pop-up ad. How many people here like pop-up ads? Nobody, not surprised. Okay, so let's say we're on YouTube and we're trying to watch our favorite concert video or a funny comedian or whatever, and then we get a pop-up. What do? Skip. Next. Sometimes we might have to watch it for like 7 seconds or 12 seconds or whatever. But after you guys skip a pop-up ad or, go by it, does anybody here lay in bed awake at night thinking, oh, I should have clicked on that pop-up ad? No, right? Nobody does that. Or it's probably rare. I shouldn't say nobody. Somebody does that, but it's pretty rare. What if we could do that with our negative thoughts? Our negative thought pops in our head. We give it attention for 7, 12 seconds, maybe even a few minutes, but we don't let it ruin our day. We don't let it keep us up at night. And how we do that, again, is try to get distance from those thoughts by reframing and identifying those thoughts. But again, once you notice that pattern, that starts to give you a little distance right away. So again, I always like to say the disclaimer, much easier for me to stand up here and talk about it than to really identify it in our own lives. It can be really tricky. Failure and growth mindset. So, how many people here have failed at something before? Yep. How many people have learned something from that? We could skip this slide then, we're good. So failure, a lot of people look at failure as the opposite of success. That's just not true. It's one of the stepping stones to success. In failure, we're collecting information. How many people think that, how many people have been really extremely good at something the first time that they ever did it? Almost never, right? You may mess up, you miss more shots. If you're a basketball player, you probably miss more shots than you made in your lifespan. And failure can be difficult. I know you're collecting information and you're learning from it, but it still can hurt, right? It doesn't feel good to fail. But there are some steps you could take to do things a little better. Next step, I should say, is reflect. And if you're anything like me, you skip this step. I mess up on something, and then I just jump back in. I make the same mistakes again all the time. And it's just the wrong way to do it, right? You got to step back. You got to reflect what worked and what didn't work. And going back to the SMART goal I talked about, maybe that's restructuring a SMART goal, doing it a little differently, and using what you learned to do things a little better. That might also be asking for help. So maybe you're asking help from somebody who's done that thing you're trying to do. Or maybe you just need that person, that loved one, that friend who's the cheerleader in your corner, coaching you on to kind of push you to, complete or finish or keep trying. So, but you also want to be gentle with yourself. We fail all the time. It can be hard, but don't be too hard on yourself. It's okay. And it's okay also to change your plans. If let's say you're like, oh, I'm going to run a marathon in 3 months, but you haven't run a mile in 3 years, you might not be able to do that goal, right? Yeah, it's going to be hard. But sometimes we think we can, and we're like, I'm going to do this. And then you get into week 3, and you're like, there is no way I'm going to be able to run a marathon in 3 months. So it's okay to change your goal a little bit. What's the smaller step that you could reach? So maybe that first step is I'm going to run a 5K in 3 months. And then I'm going to work up to that marathon. That's going to be a long-term goal, maybe in 2 years or something like that. Something I just saw recently, which honestly I think I'm going to put on this slide in the future, is the word FAIL, F-A-I-L. It stands for First Attempt in Learning, which I think is really important to remember because, again, we're going to fail every single time on that first try, but we just got to keep at it. Resilience. So, resilience is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedies, threats, or significant forms of stress. So, resilience is kind of your bounce back. How can you recover from stress? And the most resilient person in the world still experiences stress in their life. They just have more tools to be able to kind of get relief from that. And generally, the most resilient people are the people who have faced the most hardships because they've had to learn how to be resilient. Now, if you don't feel like you are a resilient person, that's okay. That's because there are some steps you could take to become more resilient. So the way I like to kind of like describe resilience is like, let's say we have a basketball. Like I have a basketball right here and I drop it. What's going to happen? Bounces back, right? Now let's say I have a watermelon and I do the same thing. What's going to happen? Watermelon soup, right? So be the basketball. Don't be the watermelon. Now, how do we build our resilience? So this slide I think is really important because I think resilience has been a buzzword the past couple years, and I don't think people completely understand it and how to build your resilience. But there are really concrete ways to help build your resilience to help you become a more resilient person to stress. So building block number one, building connections. And that means spending time with loved ones. And again, being intentional. Intentional is a lot of times the key word. So that means spending time with family, friends, people you care about. And that means in person. Not that texting, calling, and social media, those things are also great supplements to socializing and seeing people you love. But seeing people in person, spending time with them, we're getting to that season again, where we're going to probably spend a lot of time with family and friends with the holidays coming up. But again, that is really, really important. Asking for help. Kind of already talked about that, but it's important to ask for help. Sometimes it might look like joining a club or a group. So finding people that might share the same interests as you. So, sometimes too, we might have an interest that like our circle isn't into. Like maybe like, oh, I'm so into knitting, but nobody I know knows how to knit. Join a group. You're going to find people who have very similar and common interests as you. It's a great way to get started. Building block number two, fostering wellness. So taking care of your body. I know I already mentioned this, but I'm going to say it again because it's important. Drink enough water. Don't skip meals and eat healthy food. Exercise and get 8 hours of sleep every night. Again, that's essential if you're overwhelmed, stressed out, or living with a mental health condition. And sometimes, again, you might have to create a routine with that. Practicing mindfulness, I'm going to go into that in more detail after this, so I'm going to skip that for right now. But also avoiding negative outlets. If you have that negativity could be contagious. So, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to avoid all negative outlets, right? That'd be nice if we could. But I think that means you're on an island all alone somewhere. But making sure that you're around a lot of positive pieces as well. Building block number three, finding purpose. So this one's probably like the most fun. It's the best one. It's where you really get to express yourself. Like what do you do that you really enjoy and how do you express it? This is actually where like social media kind of comes in handy because you can kind of put on display your art, your music, your fashion. Maybe you're into makeup or hair. Maybe you're a magician or a comedian or whatever it is. Sometimes this looks like volunteering. So joining a cause, something you believe in, finding other people who believe in that same cause and working towards it. And really, again, embracing who you are. And it's okay, whoever you are, whatever you like to do, that's okay, no matter what anybody else says. And building block number four, healthy thoughts. And as you can see, that does say healthy thoughts. That does not say happy thoughts. And that's because we have a wide range of emotions, and all of them are valid. And we need all of them. And how we kind of maintain some healthy thoughts is keeping things in perspective. So what can you control and what is out of your control? Now, if we're really over-focusing and trying to control things that are not in our control, that's going to stress us out. For our young people, I mean, probably for all older people, but, climate change. That's something we can't wake up tomorrow and just say, oh, we're not going to climate change anymore. Sure, we could join a cause and do things to kind of, prevent that or mitigate that, I should say, but it's not something we really have control over. Things like gender inequality, gun violence, racism, sexism, like all those things, again, we don't have much control over it. So again, trying to control those things could cause more stress in our life. Maintaining hope and being optimistic. And that doesn't mean being optimistic about everything. If there's things that just are no good, right? And that's called toxic positivity. If you're just like, oh, everything's good, everything's okay. It's totally fine to have a lot of things in our lives that aren't okay. But when you're trying to be optimistic and keep those healthy thoughts, you are trying to find the good in your day. So maybe you had like a really bummer day. Maybe your alarm didn't go off and you were late for work. And because you were late for work, you forgot your lunch. And then you show up to work and then your boss gives you feedback on a project you did and it wasn't really the feedback you hoped for. And then you were expecting to go out after work with your partner, with your husband, whatever, husband, wife, or whatever. And then the babysitter calls sick and then you can't go out. You're like, oh my God, today was terrible. But was it all terrible? Maybe there was like a nugget of goodness in it. Maybe because you forgot your lunch, you ended up going out to lunch with a coworker that you haven't had like a really great one-on-one conversation with them. But because you forgot your lunch, you were able to kind of find some time to spend with them. That doesn't take away that the rest of the day didn't go well, right? But it does help you focus a little bit more on the positive. All right, mindfulness. There's a lot of definitions out there for mindfulness. This is probably the simplest one that I really like. Paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. Now, there are so many different types of mindfulness. I think a lot of times people think of mindful breathing or meditation, but you could practice mindfulness in a lot of ways. There is mindfulness when you're cooking or baking. There's something called forest bathing, where you go into the woods with like a group leader and they help you like kind of experience and enjoy nature. Again, there's so many different types that's a whole other presentation to really get into all those different types. But I do guarantee that there is a form of mindfulness out there that you enjoy. Is there any musicians here? Anybody play any music? I'm the only one? Okay. That's one way I practice it because, when I'm playing guitar or piano or something like that, I'm really focusing on the present moment. I'm honing in. I'm not thinking about the future. I'm not thinking about the past. I'm thinking about what I'm doing right now. And mindfulness helps you really focus on that present moment. And when we have anxiety, those feelings of anxiety, that's usually because we're anxious about things that happened in the past or we're anxious about things that might happen in the future. So when you're practicing mindfulness or grounding exercises, that connects your senses to right now in this present moment and helps you get a little bit of distance from that anxiety. So if anybody here feels like meditation is not for them, another cartoon video, of course, but this is a great video that I think breaks a lot of myths about meditation. And honestly, after I watched this video, this is when I started actually having a little bit more buy-in for it myself too. So let's see what you guys think.
Despite what you may have heard, meditation does not involve joining a group, paying any fees, wearing any special outfits, sitting in a funny position, or believing in anything in particular. It is simple, secular, scientifically validated exercise for your brain. You don't have to do it yet, but just so you know, here are the 3 steps. 1, sit with your back straight and your eyes closed. 2, notice the feeling of your breath coming in and going out. Pick a spot where it's most prominent. Usually that's your nose or your chest or your belly, and just focus your full attention on the feeling of your breath coming in and going out. Now, as soon as you try to do this, your mind's going to go nuts. You're going to start thinking about, what am I going to have for lunch? Why did I say that dumb thing to my boss? Your brain's going to go nuts, and that's fine. The whole game is to notice when you've gotten lost and to start over, and then to start over again, and again, and again. Every time you do that, it's like a bicep curl for your brain, and it shows up on the brain scan. Scientists have found this in the lab. It's also, by the way, a radical act. You're breaking a lifetime's habit of walking around in a fog of projection and rumination, and you're actually focusing on what's happening right now. Meditation is unlike anything you do in the rest of your life. Failure is actually success. As I said, the whole game is just trying, failing, starting again, failing, starting again. Here's my advice. You should be meditating every day, 5 to 10 minutes a day. That's it. This doesn't require some giant investment. I don't care how busy you are. You have 5 to 10 minutes to give this a shot. I guarantee you it will make a big difference.
So I like that video a lot because I think a lot of my misconceptions of what meditation was all those things he said at the beginning, right? You don't have to wear a funny outfit, pay any fees, join a religion. It's really secular. It's something that science has shown that actually helps. So we're gonna actually. Oh no, I thought I had so I wanted to practice a breathing exercise. I'm gonna pull one up in a second. We're gonna do that after, but I forgot we have gratitude to cover too. So this is actually a perfect season to talk about gratitude because what's coming up? Thanksgiving, right? And we all go around the table with our families and we say, what are you grateful for? Now, there is research and science that shows if we practice gratitude more than just once a year, they actually say if you practice gratitude daily, then there are a lot of benefits with stress, mental health, so it helps reduce symptoms of anxiety and depression. It helps you become more optimistic, more positive, and all you really need to do is spend maybe 1 to 2 minutes a day. And my suggestions are, a lot of times people do it either early in the morning, like when they first get up, some people right before bed. Doesn't really matter. All you really need is a notebook and just write down every day 3 things you're grateful for. And nobody's here to tell you what you're grateful for either. It could be something big like, oh, I just got a promotion, or I'm so thankful for like my family, or like a roof over my head. Or you could just be like, you know what, I'm really thankful because I had some really good bacon this morning. It was delicious. That's okay. It could be big or small. And if you're having trouble like finding something to be grateful for, maybe it's one of those days like I talked about a few minutes ago, going back to your journal and seeing like, what was I grateful for last week? Sometimes that helps remind you. Also, if you're finding yourself kind of repeating things, if you're always like, my family, my coworkers, then get more specific. Who in your family and why? I'm grateful for my mom because every year on my birthday, she makes my favorite meal. I'm grateful for my partner because whenever I feel bad, he or she brings me flowers and I feel better for it. So get more specific with it. And if you're not really sure where to start in all these things we talked about, I think gratitude's a great first place to start because it's the easiest. You only need 1 or 2 minutes a day and a notebook, and that's about it. So does anybody want to share something they're grateful for? Yeah.
That I feel way better today than I felt yesterday.
That's a beautiful one. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else? Yeah. Okay. Awesome. No, that's great. That's a life-changing event right there. So I think I saw another hand over. Yeah. 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 Great. Awesome. Anybody else? Yeah. Life in general. Beautiful. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. Cool. Awesome. Well, what I want to do is actually practice a quick breathing exercise. So I'm going to look something up really quick. I like to end with us actually practicing something too. So this is really easy to find. It's on YouTube. It's called 10 Minutes of Doing Nothing. We're not going to do it for the full 10 minutes today. We're just going to do it for a couple minutes for the sake of time. And how it works is you're going to see this shape on the screen, and then the shape is going to grow, and it's going to collapse. It's going to grow, collapse, and you're just going to sync your breathing to it. So when a shape grows, you want to take that deep belly breath in, and your chest and your belly should expand a little bit. and then do that long exhale to get it all out. And going back to that video we watched a few minutes ago, you want to really try to only focus on your breathing. So for me personally, I focus on when I breathe in, that spot inside my nose. It's like almost like cooler when you breathe in like kind of deeply right here. And then I focus on the spot on my lips that I feel the breath when I exhale. Other people put their chest over their chest, or their hand over their chest or their stomach, and just kind of notice their chest and stomach kind of rising and falling. Whatever really works for you is fine. And in probably less than 20 seconds, like in the video, your brain's going to go nuts. You're going to think about, what am I going to have for lunch? Or what am I going to do for dinner? Or Thanksgiving plans, all this stuff. And that's okay. Like he said, the skill is to notice that and then gently remind yourself to focus back on your breathing. And again, this is like a muscle. So if you go to the gym, you can't bench press 500 pounds on the first day, right? But if you go every day or often enough, you're going to get closer and closer to that. Again, you want to kind of sit up straight. I also suggest there's a sound that goes with it. So after you kind of get the hang of the pattern, kind of close your eyes too and just kind of go with the sound. Does anybody have any questions before we start? Cool. Pretty simple. Noticing any tension in your shoulders, your back, just try to relax your body. And again, if your mind's starting to wander, that's okay. Just gently bring your focus back to your breathing. Some people like to imagine that you're breathing in positive energy and breathing out all those negative thoughts and experiences they're holding on to. Do 3 more big breaths.